11 Native actors, Hollywood destroyed. What if television's most famous Indigenous character was created by an actor who died penniless, while studios made millions from his face? Last month, Hollywood stripped a beloved legend of every major award after exposing a 60-year identity fraud. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Studios systematically paid Indigenous actors half what they paid other performers. Oscar ceremonies robbed deserving winners, and major productions were shut down by activists who refused to stay silent. Quick note, several of these legends were Canadian First Nations, not Native Americans, so we'll use proper terms throughout. Here are the 11 Indigenous North American actors who made Hollywood history. Number 11. Adam Beachch, the heartbreak kid who conquered Hollywood. Adam Beach's journey from tragedy to triumph represents the modern Indigenous actor's fight for authentic representation. Born on Manitoba's Dog Creek First Nation Reserve, this Saulteaux performer faced unimaginable loss early. His mother was struck by a drunk driver, and weeks later, his father drowned, leaving Beachch and his brothers orphaned. Relocating to Winnipeg, he found solace through drama classes and local theater. His breakout role in Smoke Signals marked a watershed moment for Indigenous cinema, the first feature film written, directed, and co-produced by Native Americans. Beach's portrayal of Victor Joseph showcased his ability to bring authenticity and depth to Indigenous characters beyond Hollywood stereotypes. His versatility shines in Flags of Our Fathers, where he earned acclaim playing Ira Hayes, capturing the emotional weight of the Pima Marine who helped raise the flag at Iwo Jima. Beach's commitment to authentic Indigenous representation continued through roles in Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, Law and Order SVU, and Suicide Squad. Beyond acting, Beachch dedicates himself to uplifting Indigenous voices and inspiring future generations. With over 60 films and numerous TV roles, he remains a trailblazer for Native representation, proving Indigenous actors can carry major productions while maintaining cultural authenticity. But Beach's success comes after decades of systematic exploitation that destroyed earlier generations of Indigenous performers. But even Beach's achievements pale beside what happened to the forgotten pioneers who built the foundation he stands on. Number 10. Elijah Tahamont, the silent era pioneer Hollywood forgot. Elijah Tahamont, better known by his stage name Dark Cloud, was a pioneering Indigenous actor during the silent film era, whose legacy remains criminally under-recognized. Born on the Odanak Reserve in Quebec, this Abenaki performer became one of the first Indigenous actors to regularly appear in films, often portraying Indigenous characters with grace and dignity. Tahamont first gained attention in the 1890s as a model for artist Frederick Remington, who portrayed Indigenous Americans with unusual respect for that era. This exposure helped him transition to acting in 1910, adopting the screen name Dark Cloud to appeal to Hollywood's expectations. He became one of the first Indigenous actors to work regularly in films, collaborating with director D.W. Griffith on projects including The Dishonored Medal. His calm, powerful screen presence showcased authentic Indigenous dignity rather than the savage stereotypes dominating early cinema. Though his career was tragically cut short by the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, Tahamont's work in over 30 films left a lasting impact. He challenged prevailing stereotypes and inspired future Indigenous performers, proving that authentic representation could succeed even in cinema's earliest days. His pioneering efforts paved the way for later Indigenous actors. But what came next would expose an industry willing to exploit even the most vulnerable performers in ways that seem impossible today. Number 9. Floyd Red Crow Westerman, the musician who became a movement. Floyd Red Crow Westerman transformed from Dakota musician to acclaimed actor, while never abandoning his role as a fierce advocate for Indigenous rights and environmental causes. Born on South Dakota's Lake Traverse Reservation, this Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate member experienced cultural suppression at federal boarding school, where speaking his Dakota language was prohibited. These hardships deeply influenced both his activism and artistry. Westerman first gained recognition as a musician, blending country music with themes of indigenous struggle. His 1970 album, Custer Died for Your Sins, critiqued U.S. policies toward Indigenous Americans and became a rallying cry for the Native rights movement. In the 1980s, he transitioned to acting, debuting in Renegades. His memorable roles included Ten Bears in Dances with Wolves and Uncle Ray Firewalker in Walker, Texas Ranger. Unlike many performers, Westerman used his platform to promote indigenous sovereignty and environmental protection. His passionate environmental advocacy included promoting sustainability and protecting sacred lands. Throughout his career, he remained brutally honest about Hollywood's limitations while working within the system to create opportunities for other indigenous performers. Westerman's death in 2007 marked the loss of a true warrior who fought for his people both on screen and off, never compromising his principles for commercial success. But some performers took even more direct action against industry discrimination, and what they discovered would shock an entire generation of activists. Number 8. Will Samson Jr., the gentle giant who commanded respect. Will Samson Jr., as a towering presence, both physical and spiritual, made him one of Hollywood's most compelling indigenous performers despite a tragically brief career. Standing 6 feet 7 inches, this Muskogee Creek member from Oklahoma brought commanding dignity to every role while advocating for authentic indigenous representation. Before Hollywood discovered him, Samson was a professional rodeo rider specializing in bronco busting. His film debut came by chance when producers of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest cast him as Chief Bromden, a seemingly silent mental institution patient. With no acting experience, Samson delivered a powerful performance, blending quiet dignity with emotional depth, helping the film win 5 Academy Awards. Samson continued showcasing his range, portraying Crazy Horse in The White Buffalo and Taylor, an indigenous shaman in Poltergeist 2: The Other Side. His authentic portrayals countered Hollywood's typical savage stereotypes, presenting indigenous characters as complex, spiritual beings. Off-screen, Samson was an accomplished painter and passionate advocate for indigenous rights. He consistently pushed for dignified portrayals of indigenous peoples and refused roles that perpetuated harmful stereotypes. Samson's death in 1987 at age 53 cut short a promising career, but his legacy as a groundbreaking actor and cultural advocate endures. His performances proved that authentic indigenous representation could enhance rather than limit commercial success. His advocacy built on work, started by even earlier pioneers who faced impossible odds. Performers whose stories were deliberately buried by an industry determined to control their narratives. Number 7. Luther Standing Bear, the Carlisle graduate who fought stereotypes. Luther Standing Bear's remarkable journey from Carlisle Indian Industrial School student to Hollywood pioneer represents one of the most significant early challenges to indigenous stereotypes in cinema. Born in 1868 on South Dakota's Pine Ridge Reservation, this Oglala Lakota leader dedicated his life to preserving indigenous traditions while challenging misconceptions. Standing Bear attended the infamous Carlisle School, where indigenous children were forced to assimilate, but he used this experience to bridge indigenous and Western cultures while remaining deeply connected to his heritage. He later performed with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, gaining insights into entertainment world exploitation of indigenous traditions. In 1912, Standing Bear entered Hollywood, becoming one of the first indigenous actors to regularly appear in films. He debuted in Ramona and later appeared in productions like White Oak and Union Pacific. His roles emphasized dignity and authenticity, directly countering prevailing savage stereotypes. Beyond acting, Standing Bear was a prolific writer whose books My People the Sioux and Land of the Spotted Eagle highlighted Lakota culture and spirituality while advocating for indigenous sovereignty and cultural preservation. His writings provided authentic indigenous perspectives during an era of intense assimilation pressure. Standing Bear's dual career as performer and author established him as both entertainer and cultural ambassador, inspiring future generations of Indigenous artists to maintain their cultural identity while working within mainstream industries. His literary legacy complemented the work of other early filmmakers who were challenging industry practices from within. Number 6. James Young Deere, the director who rewrote Indigenous stories. James Young Deere stands as one of Hollywood's most overlooked pioneers, a trailblazing Indigenous filmmaker during the silent era who was among the first to direct, write, and produce films that challenged stereotypical portrayals of Indigenous people. Born James Young Johnson in Washington, D.C., evidence suggests he had Indigenous roots connected to the Nanticoke people of the Chesapeake Bay region. Young Deere began his career as a stage performer before transitioning to film. By 1910, he became head of Pathé's West Coast studio, making him one of the most significant Indigenous figures behind the camera during cinema's earliest days. His position gave him unprecedented control over Indigenous representation. His films, including White Fawn's Devotion, challenged prevailing stereotypes by portraying Indigenous Americans as complex, dignified individuals rather than savage antagonists. Over his career, he directed over 150 films, many focusing on relationships between Indigenous and European peoples and highlighting Indigenous struggles. Young Deere's mixed heritage informed his storytelling, emphasizing themes of identity and resilience that resonated with audiences seeking more nuanced portrayals. His work proved that authentic Indigenous perspectives could succeed commercially while educating mainstream audiences. Despite fading from Hollywood by the 1920s, Young Deere's legacy as a pioneering Indigenous filmmaker endures. His behind-the-scenes influence helped establish foundations for more authentic representation, inspiring modern Indigenous storytellers to reclaim their narratives. But even groundbreaking filmmakers couldn't prevent the systematic exploitation that would define the industry for decades. Exploitation so severe, it would create generations of Indigenous performers trapped between fame and poverty. Number 5. Tanto Cardinal, the Métis matriarch who opened every door. Tanto Cardinal's journey from Alberta's remote communities to international stardom spans over 5 decades of groundbreaking work that established her as Indigenous cinema's most enduring female voice. Born Rosemary Cardinal to a Métis mother and white father who abandoned the family when she was 6 weeks old, she was raised by her Cree grandmother, who named her after insect repellent. Her awakening to racism came at age 15, when moving to Edmonton exposed her to negative Indigenous stereotypes for the first time. Acting for me was a way to redress this imbalance, she explains. Cardinal's life has been marked by profound tragedy. Her sister was taken during the 60s scoop. Her brother was murdered at age 24, and her mother died young from poverty-related conditions. Her breakthrough in Dances with Wolves as Black Shawl showcased authentic Indigenous womanhood rather than Hollywood's typical portrayals. She continued breaking barriers in Legends of the Fall, Smoke Signals, and the groundbreaking Canadian series North of 60, which featured predominantly Indigenous cast and crew. Cardinal's activism extends beyond entertainment. At age 61, she was arrested alongside Margot Kidder while protesting the Keystone Pipeline extension, demonstrating how Indigenous performers often risk their careers for political causes. Now, 74, she's experiencing a remarkable renaissance with her SAG Award-nominated performance in Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon and her role in Marvel's Echo. With over 120 film and television credits, Cardinal holds the distinction of being the most widely recognized Indigenous actress of her generation. But her success came during an era when Hollywood's discriminatory practices were being challenged by increasingly militant activists. Performers who would literally shut down multi-million-dollar productions rather than accept abuse. And what they exposed would make headlines worldwide. If these stories are blowing your mind, wait until you hear what's coming next. Make sure you're subscribed, because the remaining performers on this countdown faced even more shocking treatment, including systematic financial theft and career sabotage that will leave you speechless. the #1 spot, reveals the most heartbreaking story in Hollywood history. The activism Cardinal witnessed was about to reach a boiling point, with performers who refused to play by Hollywood's rules. #4. Russell Means, the revolutionary who shut down productions. Russell Means brought revolutionary politics directly to movie sets, using his fame as America's most prominent indigenous activist to challenge industry practices from within. The American Indian movement leader, who led the 71-day armed occupation of Wounded Knee, made his stunning acting debut at age 52, immediately leveraging his activist experience to transform working conditions. During The Last of the Mohicans filming, Means successfully lobbied for 175 indigenous extras to receive better pay and improved lodging, the kind of behind-the-scenes advocacy that rarely makes headlines but transforms lives. His casting opposite Daniel Day-Lewis as Chingachgook created the fascinating irony of former Wounded Knee allies Means and Wes Study playing mortal enemies on screen. Means would shut down filming entirely when he witnessed discriminatory practices, using his leverage as a known quantity to force studios into better behavior. His willingness to walk away from lucrative roles when principles were at stake set a precedent for indigenous performers who followed. He remained brutally honest about Hollywood's limitations throughout his career. In 2002, he declared, "Hollywood hasn't changed. It is the most racist institution in the world." Despite appearing in major films, including Natural-Born Killers and voicing Chief Powhatan in Disney's Pocahontas, he never compromised his principles. His final act reflected his uncompromising spirit. Dying of esophageal cancer in 2012 at his South Dakota ranch, he refused mainstream medical treatments in favor of traditional remedies. "I'm not going to argue with the great mystery," he said. Means proved that indigenous performers could maintain their political integrity while achieving Hollywood success. But his activism built on foundations laid by earlier performers who had fought similar battles, often paying devastating personal costs that would change the industry forever. #3. Wes Study, the Vietnam veteran who became cinema's greatest villain. Wes Study's journey from Wounded Knee protester to Academy Award winner represents the most dramatic transformation in indigenous cinema history. This Cherokee veteran served 12 months in Vietnam's Mekong Delta before joining the American Indian movement upon returning home, participating in both the Trail of Broken Treaties protest and the 1973 Wounded Knee occupation. His discovery of acting in his late 30s provided what he called post-Vietnam catharsis. The adrenaline rush of confronting fear on stage replaced the intensity of combat. This unique background informed his terrifying portrayal of Magua in The Last of the Mohicans, where he drew on both combat experience and enforced isolation to create cinema's most compelling indigenous villain. Behind the scenes, Study revealed the authentic deception that enhanced his performances. Many indigenous actors spoke their own tribal languages instead of scripted dialogue, creating linguistically meaningless but authentic-sounding exchanges. Cherokee Study's communication with Northern Inuit Eric Schweg created situations where audiences assumed they heard authentic Mohican dialogue, while actors spoke completely different languages. Despite appearing in over 80 productions, Study consistently fought against leathers and feathers typecasting, successfully crossing over in films like Heat, Mystery Men, and Avatar. His roles proved indigenous actors could excel beyond Western stereotypes when given opportunities. His 2019 honorary Oscar made him the first Indigenous North American actor to receive an Academy Award, a recognition that was 49 years overdue. The New York Times ranking of him as number 19 among the 25 greatest actors of the 21st century confirms his artistic achievement transcends cultural boundaries. But his historic Oscar highlights another shocking injustice that occurred decades earlier, an awards ceremony robbery so blatant it exposed Hollywood's true values for the entire world to see. #2. Graham Greene, the Oscar robbery that exposed Hollywood's true values. Graham Greene's Academy Award loss to Joe Pesci in 1991 remains one of cinema's most glaring oversights and perfectly captures Hollywood's inability to recognize Indigenous excellence. This Oneida actor from Ontario's Six Nations Reserve delivered a performance so authentic and moving in Dances with Wolves that his Oscar nomination seemed guaranteed until the ceremony revealed the industry's true priorities. Greene's path to Hollywood began while hitchhiking across Canada selling t-shirts, an unlikely origin for one of the most beloved Indigenous performers in cinema. Kevin Costner's initial reaction during the audition exposed problematic expectations. "Graham, you don't look Native enough." This comment revealed how Hollywood's Indigenous imagery was shaped by old coins rather than actual Indigenous people. Greene struggled with Lakota dialogue, admitting he couldn't figure out how they ordered their language. The actors ultimately spoke like women due to Lakota's complex, gendered aspects, proving too challenging to master during intensive preparation. Yet his performance as Kicking Bird transcended language barriers, creating one of cinema's most dignified Indigenous characters. When Joe Pesci won for Goodfellas, it represented more than personal disappointment. It symbolized Hollywood's continued marginalization of Indigenous voices even when excellence was undeniably present. The loss stung entire Indigenous communities who saw it as another example of their stories being devalued. Greene's response was characteristically understated, but his career longevity proved his worth. His versatility spans Die Hard with a Vengeance, The Green Mile, Wind River, and recent appearances in The Last of Us and Reservation Dogs. Canadian viewers remember his hilarious recurring role on The Red Green Show, showcasing remarkable comedic range. At age 72, Greene continues working regularly. His 2025 Governor General's Performing Arts Award, Canada's highest arts honor, recognizes a career spanning over 80 productions, cementing his status as one of North America's most celebrated Indigenous performers. But Greene's Oscar snub pales compared to the systematic financial exploitation that destroyed television's most famous Indigenous performer, a story so devastating it will change how you see every rerun forever. Number 1. Jay Silverhills, the television legend who died broke, despite making millions. This is the story that will shock you most, the tragic fate of television's first Indigenous lead actor, whose success story hides Hollywood's darkest financial secrets. Jay Silverhills became a household name as Tanto, but his real story exposes the systematic exploitation that destroyed Indigenous performers while making studios rich. Born Harold J. Smith on Ontario's Six Nations Reserve in 1912, this full-blooded Mohawk athlete dominated lacrosse before Hollywood discovered him. His achievements were legendary. He placed second in Madison Square Garden's Golden Gloves middleweight tournament and dominated box lacrosse circuits. The nickname Silverhills came from white lacrosse shoes that created flashes at his heels during games. When comedian Joe E. Brown spotted him in Los Angeles, Silverhills was studying Shakespeare at night while working as a busboy, dreaming of serious dramatic roles. Instead, he became trapped in typecasting that would define Indigenous performers for generations. His role as Tonto in The Lone Ranger made television history, but behind the scenes reveals a performer constantly fighting for basic dignity. During production in sweltering Chatsworth locations, Silverhills and Clayton Moore were crammed into a tiny, stifling trailer. When the director dismissed his complaints, Jay mounted his horse scout and rode off set, completely halting production. His ultimatum was direct. What isn't right is the way we are being treated. We need better working conditions. The next day, 2 air-conditioned trailers appeared. One of the first recorded instances of an Indigenous performer successfully using leverage to improve working conditions. Privately, Silverhills called Tonto stupid and resented how the Lone Ranger treats him like some kind of servant. The success that made him famous became a prison. After the show ended in 1957, typecasting made finding serious work impossible. The man who generated millions for studios was forced to work as a salesman between acting jobs. But the most shocking revelation involves his financial exploitation. despite over 100 film credits and massive cultural impact. Jay Silverhills died in 1980 with overwhelming legal debts, never owning property, while studios continued profiting from his image. Research exposed that studios systematically paid Indigenous extras exactly half what they paid white performers, $5.50 per day, compared to $11 per day for identical work. Today, Warner Bros. Still owns nearly all archival photographs of Indigenous actors, refusing reproduction rights while families receive nothing from their ancestors' likenesses. This ongoing theft represents one of Hollywood's most shameful legacies. The man who created television's most famous Indigenous character died penniless, while his image continued generating profits. Silverhills founded the Indian Actors Association in 1966, fighting for better representation and opportunities for Indigenous performers until his death. His advocacy work laid groundwork for the breakthroughs we're seeing today, but it came at tremendous personal cost. His tragic story exposes the ruthless exploitation that defined Hollywood's treatment of Indigenous talent, yet recent achievements suggest the industry may finally be transforming. From Lily Gladstone's historic Oscar nomination to the success of Reservation Dogs, Echo, and Dark Winds, authentic Indigenous voices are finally getting the recognition they deserve. The transformation from Jay Silverhills dying broke, despite making millions for studios, to today's breakthrough moments represents more than industry progress. It reflects a fundamental shift in how North America values Indigenous voices and stories. These performers didn't just entertain audiences, they fought for the dignity and respect that paved the way for today's success. Their untold stories reveal that Hollywood's treatment of Indigenous North Americans has always been about more than entertainment. It's been about power, cultural appropriation, and the ongoing struggle for Indigenous people to control their own narratives in an industry built on their suppression. The transformation from systematic exploitation to breakthrough recognition didn't happen by accident. It was won through decades of sacrifice, activism, and performers who refused to stay silent about injustice. These 11 legends didn't just make movies, they made history, and their fight for dignity continues inspiring the next generation of Indigenous storytellers who are finally getting the recognition their predecessors deserved all along.